The movie starts with Roy, a former U.S. Army captain, who learns that the lab where his ex-wife, Gemma, works is hiring new security personnel. Curious about the job and concerned for Gemma, Roy goes to the lab to apply. However, as he talks to Gemma, he notices that she seems unusually worried. Intrigued, Roy starts asking questions and discovers that Gemma is working on a project called the Osiris Spindle, a particle accelerator capable of manipulating time. Unbeknownst to Roy, Colonel Clive, the project's founder, is listening to the entire conversation. Clive, suspecting that Gemma is revealing too much, orders Brett, the security chief, to remove Roy from the premises. Brett arrives and tells Roy that the lab is a restricted area and that they aren't hiring. He takes Roy's resume to Colonel Clive, who, upon reviewing it, decides that Roy is someone to keep an eye on. Clive orders Brett to hire mercenaries to go after him. Back in the lab, Gemma secretly cuts a lock of Roy's hair. Sensing that the colonel doesn't like Roy's presence, she tries to warn him to be careful. However, before she can explain further, Brett returns with security to escort Roy out. As Roy is leaving, Gemma hugs him and whispers that she left a package at his house, and cryptically adds, "The clue is Osiris." Confused and without understanding what just happened, Roy goes to a bar where he meets a dental assistant named Alice. He starts drinking heavily, but when Alice steps away for a moment, Gemma calls him, urgently asking for his help. Unfortunately, Colonel Clive, who is eavesdropping, cuts the call short before Gemma can explain her situation. Gemma places Roy's hair in a capsule and heads towards the Osiris Spindle, unaware that the colonel is aware of her betrayal. Still in the dark about the situation, Roy goes home and spends the night with Alice. However, something Gemma did with his hair in the spindle triggers an infinite time loop for Roy. Each time he wakes up at 7 a.m., he is hunted by mercenaries. Every time he is killed, he finds himself back in bed, forced to relive the same day over and over again as if nothing had happened. After facing the same mercenaries over 140 times, Roy has perfected his ability to neutralize most of them, turning the once deadly encounters into almost routine tasks. He can now effortlessly handle a man who breaks into his home, and when a helicopter arrives, strafing his apartment with a minigun, Roy expertly throws a knife into the shooter's forehead. This causes the gunner to lose control, hitting the pilot and leading to a crash that forces Roy to jump out of the window into a sand truck to survive. Every morning begins with Roy narrowly escaping death in this pleasant manner. He then steals a random car and races through the streets, pursued by two other bounty hunters in a high-speed, Fast and Furious style chase. On the occasions when he isn't shot or doesn't crash into another vehicle, Roy manages to lose his pursuers by making a risky maneuver near a bus. He then heads straight to Mr. Chow's bar. In every iteration, Roy orders 2 bottles of liquor and starts drinking heavily, encountering the same people: Dave, a security expert, and Dai Fong, a master fencer who has won the world championship 12 times. Despite reliving this day over 100 times, Roy can't get past a certain point. No matter where he is, at exactly 12:47 p.m., all the surviving mercenaries find and eliminate him. Each time, he reappears in his bed at 7 a.m., forced to start the day over. Roy's deaths are varied and brutal. Sometimes he's beheaded by a swordsman named Guan Yin, other times he's machine-gunned by the minigun guy, or blown up by a dwarf, not to mention the routine headshots. No matter how he tries to avoid his fate, he's always eliminated, forced to relive this nightmare over and over again. In one of the cycles, Roy finally suspects that his endless loop has something to do with the Osiris Spindle, the mysterious device Gemma was working on. He tries to call her for help, but instead, Colonel Clive answers, coldly informing him that Gemma suffered a suspicious accident and is no longer alive. Before Roy can even process this devastating news, a pair of twins suddenly appear out of nowhere and blow him up with 2 bazooka shots. Now knowing that Gemma is gone and unable to help him, Roy spends attempt after attempt trying to uncover the truth behind his situation. Each time, however, he's inevitably eliminated by the mercenaries at exactly 12:47 p.m. Frustrated and desperate, Roy finally recalls something Gemma said when she bid him farewell. He decides to examine the package she left for him at his house. Inside, he finds an envelope containing a book with Osiris on the cover. In a moment of misguided focus, Roy forgets the danger he's in and starts reading the book right in the middle of the room. He's soon eliminated by the helicopter gunman once again. In the next cycle, Roy, ever the determined yet reckless survivor, steals the same car as usual and attempts to read the book while driving. This ill-conceived plan ends with him being hit by a bus, killing him instantly. After these two failed attempts, Roy finally comes up with a better plan. After blowing up the bounty hunter's car with a grenade launcher, he heads to a quieter, safer place where he can finally read the book and decipher the clues Gemma left for him. This moment marks a turning point in Roy's journey as he begins to piece together the mystery behind the Osiris spindle and the time loop that has trapped him. Sitting on a bench in a dimly lit underground gallery, Roy opens the book Gemma left for him. Several sentences are underlined, providing clues to unravel the mystery of the Osiris spindle. As he tries to make sense of the highlighted passages, Roy notices his son, Joey, walking by, purchasing something from a man, and entering a video game store. Roy suddenly realizes that with Gemma gone, he's the only family Joey has left. However, there's a catch. Joey doesn't know that Roy is his father. Determined to connect with his son, Roy enters the video game store, looking for Joey. As he moves through the store, something strange begins to happen. The analog monitors around him start experiencing interference, flickering and glitching the closer he gets. Ignoring the disruptions, Roy finally finds Joey. They start talking, and Roy, trying to make up for lost time, decides to take Joey for a walk. As they leave the gallery, Roy catches sight of a clock and realizes with horror that it's already 12:50 p.m., 3 minutes past the time he usually gets killed. This realization strikes him as odd. Reflecting on his previous experiences, he recalls that the bar and the underground gallery were the two places where he managed to survive the longest. Both locations have characteristics that interfere with radio waves and GPS, which makes him suspect that he's being tracked. However, before he can act on this new theory, the remaining mercenaries corner him and Joey. With no time left, Roy sprints a few meters with Joey in his arms before they're gunned down. As always, Roy loses his life instantly, only to wake up again at 7 a.m. in his bed. This time, instead of immediately eliminating the mercenary who always tries to kill him first, Roy captures the guy and tries to extract information. He presses him for details about how he's being tracked. Realizing the man won't talk, Roy throws him in front of the minigun-wielding mercenary, who shreds the man like paper. Frustrated by the failed interrogation, Roy resorts to Plan B. He speeds to Mr. Chow's restaurant and heads straight to the bathroom, where he frantically searches his clothes and body for any tracking devices but finds nothing. On his way out, Roy passes Dave, the security expert, and remembers that Dave would likely know a lot about surveillance. Roy strikes up a conversation with him about trackers, and Dave reveals that the most common place to implant a tracker is in a molar. Roy's mind flashes back to the night before with the dental assistant, realizing she must have implanted the tracker in him. Desperate to get rid of the device, Roy asks Mr. Chow for a pair of pliers, returns to the bathroom, and begins the painful process of pulling out his own teeth, one by one. Finally, he finds the tracker, but his victory is short-lived. At exactly 12:47 p.m., one of the mercenaries bursts into the bathroom, spotting Roy with the tracker in his hand. It's game over once more. In the next cycle, Roy takes out the first mercenary as usual but changes his approach with Alice. Instead of letting her run, he captures her and forces her to reveal who sent her to implant the tracker. With this new information, Roy finally understands that the Colonel is behind everything. Roy heads back to the bar, pulls out his tooth with the tracker again. He begins to lure the mercenaries to him, one by one, and systematically eliminates them using the same brutal methods they had used on him in previous cycles. After each kill, Roy gathers the bodies in an abandoned factory. He places explosives on their remains and sets off a massive explosion. Finally, with the mercenaries eliminated, Roy is one step closer to ending the cycle and getting his revenge on Colonel Clive. Roy receives a call from Brett, who taunts him, but Roy vows to avenge Gemma. Roy drives to the research center. However, each of his attempts to infiltrate the heavily guarded facility results in failure. Every time he tries a direct approach, he catches the attention of the guards and is swiftly eliminated by Brett. Frustrated, Roy even accidentally ends his own life by crashing into a wall during one of his reckless attempts. Realizing brute force isn't the answer, he begins by eliminating one of the mercenaries who has been chasing him in previous cycles, stealing the mercenary's clothes and badge to use as a disguise. Roy's plan seems solid, but when he tries to use the ID card in the elevator, the security system fails to read it. His cover is blown when a security guard in the elevator asks to check the card, leading to another failed attempt. In the next cycle, Roy learns from his mistake and eliminates the elevator guard before he can even ask to see the ID. However, upon reaching the desired floor, he's ambushed by Brett and other security guards, leaving him no choice but to take his own life and start over once more. On his third attempt, Roy carefully retraces his steps. This time, he finally realizes the true reason why he's always being discovered and eliminated: a security camera on the floor he needs to reach. With this knowledge in hand, Roy knows he must disable the security system if he has any hope of confronting Brett and the Colonel. On his fourth attempt, Roy decides to steal the uniform and access card of one of the security guards outside the building. With this new disguise, as he steps out of the elevator, Roy begins methodically eliminating the unsuspecting guards, making his way deeper into the facility. Eventually, he reaches the next room, where he finds Guan-Yin, a deadly swordswoman, already waiting for him. After a brief exchange of words, she slices through Roy's pistol with ease and then decapitates him, ending his attempt in mere seconds. Realizing that a simple pistol won't suffice, he arms himself with more powerful weapons, such as a submachine gun and even a rifle, but each time, Guan-Yin's mastery with her sword proves too much, and Roy loses his head repeatedly. After numerous failed attempts, Roy remembers that he still hasn't fully deciphered the clues in the Osiris book Gemma left for him. He heads back to the underground gallery, where he takes the time to carefully read the underlying sentences Gemma had marked. As he reads, Roy has a revelation. Gemma was the one who used the Osiris spindle to create the time loop, and she left these clues specifically for him. The message becomes clear: if Roy wants to end the cycle of endless death and destruction, he must stop Colonel Clive and shut down the spindle. Having endured countless cycles of combat and training, Roy realizes that his current state cannot overcome Guan-Yin. He decides to abandon direct confrontation and seeks out Dai Fong, the fencer, for rigorous training in swordsmanship. Over numerous cycles, Roy hones his skills under Dai Fong's tutelage. Roy returns to face Guan-Yin. He picks up one of the swords hanging on the wall and engages in combat with her, showcasing his new abilities. Roy outclasses Guan-Yin. After savoring his victory, he eventually stabs Guan-Yin with her own sword. Brett and Colonel Clive enter the room. Brett starts shooting at Roy, forcing him to take cover behind a pillar. When Brett moves forward to attack, Roy seizes the opportunity, stabbing Brett with Guan-Yin's sword, eliminating him. With Brett out of the way, Roy turns his attention to Colonel Clive. He challenges the Colonel to hand-to-hand combat. The Colonel's superior skills give him the upper hand. Roy is thrown aside, and Clive attempts to grab Brett's dropped pistol. Roy stabs the Colonel's hand with his sword, preventing him from using the weapon. Roy confronts him, revealing that Gemma used the Osiris spindle to set up this confrontation, and that his true focus should be on protecting his son, Joey. The Colonel dismisses Roy's concerns, making a chilling remark about Roy's priorities. Roy kills the Colonel and rushes to the gallery. Upon arrival, he is met with the devastating sight of his son's lifeless body being carried away by coroners. The brutal reality of his loss hits him hard. Roy watches as the world collapses around him due to the effects of the Osiris spindle. The universe begins to unravel, and despite the end of everything, Roy remains paralyzed by the grief of losing Gemma and his son, Joey. However, Roy eventually decides to make use of his curse constructively. He starts by eliminating the first mercenary, stealing a car, and heading to the gallery. There, he spends time playing video games with Joey, finding solace in these moments despite knowing the inevitable end. Each day still ends with the global meltdown. During one of their conversations, Joey mentions that Gemma had called him in the morning, indicating that she had not been eliminated around 3 a.m. as Roy had previously thought. Realizing that all cycles begin exactly at 7 a.m., Roy checks Joey's cell phone and finds that Gemma was still alive at 7:03 a.m. This new information rekindles Roy's hope. If Gemma is alive when the cycle begins, there might still be a chance to save her. With renewed determination, Roy decides to use his remaining time wisely. He knows that Gemma is still alive at the start of the cycle and resolves to find a way to stop the collapse and rescue her. He revisits the gallery and carefully avoids the mistakes that led to the previous failures. He begins to experiment with different strategies, attempting to outsmart the mercenaries and avoid the traps set by the Colonel. The cycles continue, but now with a focused purpose. To rescue Gemma, protect Joey, and find a way to prevent the universe's collapse. With only 14 minutes to spare, he wakes up, takes down the mercenaries with strategic precision, and uses a helicopter to tackle the minigun shooter. This new approach allows him to clear his path efficiently, eliminating the bounty hunters and guards that previously thwarted him. With the building secured and Gemma saved, Roy confronts Brett one last time, finishing him off before moving on to the Colonel. After the intense battle, Roy and Gemma head to the Spindle. Gemma reveals that Roy's DNA has been altered and needs to be restored to prevent the universe's collapse. To resolve the instability and end the cycle, Roy must return his mask to the Spindle's core. With a heavy heart, Roy expresses his love for Gemma and shares a final kiss, knowing this might be his last moment with her. He walks towards the core, prepared to sacrifice himself to restore balance and end the loop. Roy enters the Spindle, and as he does, he restores the universe's stability. Thank you for watching.